Good morning everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Now, anyone who's watched the previous video is going to go, look, she's in exactly the same space, and that's true. And I could have, faked it and moved to a different spot to film this video, but yeah, I'm doing 2 voiceovers in a row. Standing in the same spot, in the same clothing. As I said, I could fake it, but it's too much of it. So, today's video is a what we eat in a week. It spans about 9 days, I think it is. I haven't done any this month yet, and normally I do 2 in the month, but I just haven't had time to get them done. So I'm going to do this one to hopefully come out while I'm doing my grocery run. And it crosses over some of what we got in the hamper food. So it'll be before the hamper and then a couple of days after we got the hamper as well. For anyone who hasn't seen one of our What We Eat in a Week videos before, we live off-grid. There's 8 of us, 6 kids, 2 adults, and we homeschool, and we don't leave the property pretty much. I don't leave the property except for groceries. So I only leave the property every 6 weeks for 3 days, and that's it. Darryl does drive into town to grab animal feed or anything things like that we need in town, visit the post office, and takes the kids with him on those trips. So they get rotating turns. We don't have a car that fits him and all the kids, but with rotating turns for the kids and him to go in, and there's a park in there and they get a treat at the shop and things like that. But I prefer to just stay home. I got enough to do. So all our meals are made from home. We only shop every 6 weeks, so all our food is made over a 6-week span only from what I purchase that once every 6 weeks. It means that there's towards the end of the month, which this video is, I am going grocery shopping tomorrow. So this is the last, pretty much the last week before we go grocery shopping. It means that sometimes there's a bit of repetitiveness, and sometimes there's a little bit of throwing things together that I wouldn't necessarily have thrown together for a meal, except that we're a bit low on bits and pieces. So that's when most people like to see the meals anyway, because that shows the real life of shopping that far apart and still making, as nutrient dense possible meals as we can to please everyone, but with limited resources. So I don't show breakfasts most days. Darryl and I don't eat breakfast. We just have coffee. The kids it's a bit of a fend for yourself for breakfast. It is leftovers, or it is porridge, which I generally cook for them, yogurt, which I make for them, and granola, which I also make for them. But sometimes they have Wheat Bix left, or cornflakes, or rice bubbles from the shopping trip. Not normally by this point in the month though. We got the hamper, so there's been a lot of bread. We don't buy bread normally, I only bake it. But when we get the hamper, which is a food bank, food pantry type thing that we get once every 4 weeks, there is normally loaves of bread in it, and so they get to have toast with eggs or whatever they want as well. So generally speaking, that it's a bit of a fend for themselves for breakfast, and then I cook lunch, which is Darryl and my breakfast, and dinner. Snacks in between as well. We do baking and all that, but I just show what I happen to film over that span of the time. So this in no way shows everything that we eat, but it is the main meals. Darryl and I aren't much for snacking, so it is pretty much everything Darryl and I eat, but the kids we bake biscuits and we bake cakes and we make other dough, like cinnamon scrolls, or we make pies or whatever. Like they eat plenty of other bits and pieces, and we make our own dairy-free hot chocolate powder, so they have hot chocolates of an evening quite often. Darryl and I drink a lot of tea and coffee, so I'm not showing all those bits and pieces. I'm purely showing the main lunch and dinner meals that we make. So this is around about 9 days, I think. So enjoy watching, and I'll see you at the end. Alrighty, so on day 1, the first thing I'm doing in the morning is shaping the pizza dough that I had proved overnight, because we're going to have pizza for dinner. So I had made this pizza dough the day before. It had gone inside, because we have the fire running inside. It's too cold outside at the moment, and my kitchen is on my patio. So I brought the pizza dough inside, away from the fire, but inside where it's a bit warmer, to prove for pizza for dinner tonight. It's sourdough, so it needs the whole night proving. So I've shaped all the pizza dough into the 8 pizzas, put that in the fridge for use for later tonight. For lunch, we had okonomiyaki, which is one of our favourites. It shows up in a lot of my What We Eat in a Week. So does the pizza, because we generally have pizza once a week. So, So okonomiyaki is a Japanese cabbage pancake. Cabbage lasts us really well. So I can just about buy cabbage at the beginning of the 6 weeks. Well, I pretty much have, because this is like 5 weeks in and these cabbages were bought at that 6-week grocery shop. So Rooster has come to join me again today. You'll have to excuse him. So the cabbage has been sitting in the fridge for 5 weeks, and other than peeling a few extra leaves off the outside, it's still perfectly good. It's definitely one that we'll have, a bulk supply of when we have a cold room, because it just lasts so well, and it can be used in so many different ways. We really enjoy cabbage. So we have this cabbage pancake. I don't follow a particularly significant recipe for my okonomiyaki because I base it on what I have. So, like a lot of them say handfuls of cabbage or quarters of cabbage or eighths of cabbage, but that's a variable amount. So I just cut up half cabbage and I put half a dozen eggs in it, and then I work from there. So it's all it is the cabbage, the eggs, flour, water, and soy sauce. So if I add the 6 eggs, I put a dash of soy sauce, put a cup of flour in, half a cup of water, and then I adjust it as needed, just like you would a pancake dough. And then you knead it at whatever consistency you want. If you like your vegetable pancakes to have really thick batters, then that's how you do it. If you like thin batters, then that's how you do it. So it's a very versatile meal, that one. We served it with some grilled chicken and then some sweet soy or ABC sauce or ketchup mayonnaise, however it's pronounced. I get it wrong pretty much every time. And some mayo, and everyone adores okonomiyaki for lunch. For dinner that night, we had pizza. All our standard things that we put on pizza: salami, tin corn, home canned pineapple pieces. There was some grilled chicken, and I think some pulled pork or pork mince, whatever meat we have left, like little ends of, I'll use for pizza night. Marinated mushrooms on some, anchovies for some. We used the plum barbecue as the sauce this time because we have no pizza sauce on the shelves at the moment. Tomatoes are out of season, and I didn't grow any this year because my garden failed, and so we don't have much in the way of pizza sauce at the moment. So I just used our plum barbecue sauce because we have plenty of that. I had also made a chocolate cake earlier in the day, so I sliced that up for after dinner. My pizza had cheese on it because, I can. I always make mine last, and I have cheese on mine because, it's my prerogative to do so, and so I do. I really adore the sourdough pizza base. It is so much lighter and chewier than a same-day yeasted one. We make same-day yeasted ones it's fine, but I try to make the effort to make the sourdough ones because I really enjoy it far more. I find it a lot easier, a lot less dense, it's just really tasty and worthwhile doing. On day 2, we had corn tortillas for lunch. So I used my tortilla press. I made 40-gram-ish tortillas, just small ones. And I've been buying the masa from Amazon, and it's not overly expensive, but it's not particularly cheap either. And we go through a fair bit of it when you're making enough tortillas for 8 people. Like, the kids want 3, 4 maybe, the bigger kids, and Darryl quite easily can eat 4 as well, and it depends on what we're putting in them as to how many you need to. And so we're going through it pretty fast. So if anyone has any sources for buying it in bulk, that would be great. But at the moment I've been buying it from Amazon because that's the only choice I've had. I thought I'd show you, because I'm making this, that it was a good time to show you the canned pork off the shelf. So this is just those cheap rolled roasts from Costco that I showed you that I was canning the other day. We just drained the excess liquid off and put it in the cast iron pan. You can add sauce if you want at this point, but we just have it plain for situations like this. And if you put it in the pan, break it up a little bit and let it sit for a bit, it'll get nice and crispy. If you move it around too much, it'll just fall apart even more. So we fried it up in the cast iron just with a bit of lard and made it nice and crispy. I had some cheese in mind with the pork, and then we pulled some of the guacamole that I had frozen when I had the surplus avocados out and defrosted it and used it as well. I'm really loving how well this has defrosted. The guacamole has kept its nice vivid green colour. It's lovely and tart. I put plenty of lemon and lime juice in it, so it's really nice and fresh tasting, and the colour is great. So the freezing of this guacamole was a wonderful thing to do, and I definitely will do that again next time I get a bunch of avocados, because it's definitely getting used in this way. And sometimes it's really hard when you get bulk avocados to figure out how you're going to use them in time before they go bad. So for dinner, I made ramen. So I'm trying to instigate a few meals that we like, but I don't make often, just because I don't have the experience with it. It's a bit like the black beans and the Mexican food and things like that. It's not something I've made a whole lot of, so I'm trying to introduce it in ways that we enjoy. I really like ramen, but I just don't cook it very often because I just don't know enough. So I've been watching a few different videos and stuff, and I tried a recipe from Pick Up Limes is the name of the channel, and she has a website as well. There was a ramen off. There was her sister and her partner or something, and this was one of the recipes, and it was a miso based one. Again, I really like miso. I don't use it that often, and I really should use it more, so I am going to do that. I would like to make my own miso at some point. I saw it recently on Pro Home Cooks, and then Diane from Diane and Samson made some too, and it tickled me. I'd really like to make it, but it's a very long-term thing, so we'll see. Anyway, I really like the flavour of miso, and it's good for you. So the base for this sauce makes it creamy. So you use the miso, it uses a coconut cream and I think they're plant-based channels, so they probably use coconut cream as well. And then a smooth, they use a sesame paste. I don't have sesame paste, and so I just used, and they said you can use like a nut butter instead, so I just used a smooth peanut butter in it instead. Some chili bean paste, which I had bought from Amazon during this month. It was outside of my groceries shop. I was ordering something from Amazon and I saw this recipe, so I grabbed that as well. Garlic and ginger and some stock. Now I used cabbage in mine because that's what I had. Obviously that's not the standard veg for a ramen type dish, like a little bit of bok choy or pak choy or some julienne carrots or bean sprouts or something, would have been ideal, but I had cabbage, so that's what we used, and no one complained because no one knew any different. So I cooked the noodles separately, added some grilled chicken thighs into the soup as well, put the noodles into the bowl, and then poured the soup over the noodles. It was very well received, and the ramen noodles that I bought, which were a kilo for $3.10, this particular sort that I bought and I really enjoyed. The ingredient list is really nice and clean, which is not something I harp on, but 2-minute noodles, the amount of things that are in 2-minute noodles, even just the noodles themselves, they're just noodles. So being able to buy ramen noodles that have like 3 ingredients is a really nice thing, I think. So they're $3.10 for a kilo. We used about 600 grams in the one meal. We probably could use a kilo, to be honest. So $3.10 for noodles for a meal for 8 of ramen is not bad. So that is on the shopping list because it's a Coles Woolies thing. That has already been put in the cart for buying this month as well, and I'll buy half a dozen of them, so I've got them there as a choice. Day 4, I had made focaccia the afternoon before and proofed it overnight, like I do with all my sourdoughs. Because it's too cold in my outdoor kitchen at the moment, I bring it inside at a distance from the fire, but where it's warmer. Now, obviously the fire was a bit warmer last night than it has been, and the dough is a little overproofed. So the other part with sourdough too is that if we're bringing it in for the fire, and the fire depends on what we're running the fire at, but when it's really cold, Darryl has a tendency to really stoke the fire up, and it can be sort of 24 to 25 degrees inside, and that's a little warm for my dough, generally speaking. So I need to drop the starter amount in my dough so that it doesn't overproof overnight, and I just forgot. So next time I make focaccia and it's a cold night that he's running the fire, I'll just put half the amount of starter in it so that it proofs a little bit slower. But anyway, I dimpled it and baked it because I wasn't not going to, and it turned out fine. Then I cut it up into little mini sandwich pieces for the kids and gave it to them on a platter with the toppings that they wanted to eat or not. They could have it with, like, I think I cooked bacon and eggs and things like that. Some just chose to have it with peanut butter and jam. So, whatever, that was their choice. Darryl and I had some with the caramelized onion jam on it, mayo, a bit of bacon and a fried egg, and had it like that. For dinner that night, I did lasagna soup. This is a firm favourite in our house for winter meals. It's a little bit of effort, but it's worth it. And there's nearly always leftovers, which is nice because eating it the next day is lovely. Like any sort of a bolognese or lasagna sort of thing, it's really nice the next day. So I cooked off onion and garlic and zucchini and carrot from the freezer. I added a 1,200 gram bag of our frozen bolognese. That's what I freeze it in, is 1,200 gram lots, 1.2 kilos. And then that's full of our normal stuff. That's, got full of the veggies, the lentils, the beef, and all that sort of thing. I added a jar of my pasta sauce that I can, which again is tomatoes, veggies pureed up and canned. A jar of passata and some stock. I think I used water with some of the beef stock paste that I made the other day for this particular one because I don't have any stock canned on the shelves at the moment. Then I let it simmer. So you let it simmer for a few hours. It's a soup. So you want the beef to soften up, you want those lentils to soften up, and you want everything to amalgamate. Then I'd made sourdough pasta up the day before, the actual dough up. So I used my Thermomix for that. I mix it up in the Thermomix and then I roll it out into a disc. I let it ferment for a few hours and then it goes in the fridge. I use a very basic recipe. I do 400 grams of flour, 100 grams of starter, 3 eggs and 60 grams of oil. So it's been in the fridge overnight and I pulled it out, and using my KitchenAid attachment I rolled it out nice and thin but cut it into big thick strips. I let it dry on the rack in front of a fan for a couple of hours just so that it gets a little bit of a skin on it, which stops it sticking as badly when you're trying to put it into the soup, to have that little bit of a partially dried sort of a texture to it. And then about 15 minutes before we were ready to serve dinner, I just get the soup back up to a boil and then I break the pasta off into it. Put some pasta in, mix it up so that the pasta is got the fatty soup coating it so it doesn't stick to itself. Add a bit more, mix it up, add a bit more, mix it up. Then you want to simmer it until the pasta is really nice and soft. Because it's a pasta soup, you want that pasta to be really soft and silky. You don't want al dente pasta in this. You want it to be really soft and silky, which is very easy to do when you're talking about sourdough pasta that is fresh made that day. So it doesn't take very long at all. But the starches in the pasta also help thicken the soup, which is a nice sideline to putting that nice fresh pasta in there. You can use the lasagna sheets that you buy, the fresh rolled lasagna sheets, like the San Remo brand or whatever it is, Latina, I don't know, whether the fresh lasagna sheets that you buy in the deli sections of your supermarkets, cutting them up roughly works really well as well. But you can use dried pasta. If you use dried pasta, use more liquid. If you use dried pasta, I find that it sucks up far, far more liquid than using fresh, and it means that you end up with pretty much a pasta bake consistency rather than a soup. So we served that up with some of the leftover focaccia as well. Super tasty, very, very filling, warm, hearty meal for winter. On day 5, I didn't have anything filmed for lunch, so I'm guessing we probably had leftover lasagna soup, which makes sense. So I don't have anything filmed for lunch that day, but yes, I'm guessing that we probably had leftover lasagna soup. For dinner, I pulled the pie filling and the crust that I put in the freezer. So the other day I made the beef pie, and I put one of the crusts in the freezer as well as a serving of filling in the freezer as well. I have never frozen my pie crust before, so I wasn't sure how it would work, but I wanted to give it a go. So I defrosted them both in the fridge from the day before, stuck them in the fridge the day before, ready to use. I rolled out the crust, filled it with the filling. The filling was still a little bit frozen in spots, but it was late and I just wanted to get it made, so I just broke it up as much as possible. You don't want to heat your pie filling and then put it in the pastry because you're going to end up with soggy crust. So you want the pie filling cold. So the bits of frozen bits, I wasn't overly concerned. I just broke it up and stuck it in the pie crust, put the topping on it and cut a slit in the top so the steam could escape. It cooked up wonderfully. The crust was still lovely and light and crispy, just short enough. It was perfect, actually. The beef heated up really well, no soggy crusts. We served it over mashed potato with some steamed veg, and it was very well received, and it tasted like fresh. Now, I wouldn't necessarily freeze these things all that often because it takes up freezer space, and making pastry isn't hard. The filling maybe, though, like if I cooked up especially if I slow cooked it or did it in the smoker, that would be really nice. If I did the beef pie filling in bulk in the smoker and then froze it in portions, that would probably be really good. So we will see. But I can also can the pie filling and use it straight out of the can, just thicken it slightly. So, I don't know. Anyway, I wanted to test how it worked frozen, and it worked, which is, what I learnt from that, and that was good. On day 6, as I always said, breakfast is a feed yourself affair, but more often than not, I do cook something for them. Porridge is a common one. So I thought because I'm making porridge this morning, I'd film it just to, prove the point, because I do get questioned about it a little bit. So they love chocolate porridge or brown sugar cinnamon porridge. I don't measure anything. I just eyeball it. I throw oats in a pot. I put a litre of milk kefir in and then 1 or 2 jars of water as needed. some cacao, sugar, salt and cinnamon, and then I stir it. And then depending on the patience of the kids, some days it will be better than others, because if I stir it and then I add more liquid as I'm stirring and it gets that soft, silky, smooth, really nice, you know, good mouthfeel texture, but most of the time they don't want to wait, so we get it cooked and that's enough. So the oats are still somewhat chewy, and it's not as thick and creamy as I would like, but I'm not eating it, so it doesn't matter. So we make it however they want it, whatever level of patience they have for wanting it, and that's what we do. For dinner that night, obviously I didn't film lunch that day either. I'm not sure why, but I didn't. So for dinner that night, we had the lemon chicken that we all love. So I marinate the chicken in soy, ginger and garlic. This was chicken breast that I had filleted and put in the freezer, so I pulled it out and defrosted it. So I marinate it in soy, ginger and garlic. Then it gets dipped into the potato starch that's seasoned with salt and pepper and then fried off in oil. It's really super simple, but it is so tasty. We do this probably twice a month, using cold pressed vegetable oil, and I'm okay with it every now and again. I wouldn't like to deep fry my food all the time, but I'm okay with it on every now and again. So we did that. I cooked some really nice wet silky coconut rice to go with it, and we steamed some frozen veg, and then we served it with the lemon chung syrup over the top. So the lemon chung syrup is the lemons and sugar put in a jar and allowed to macerate, basically. So all you do is you slice all your lemons, you push them in a jar, you put the same amount of sugar pretty much as lemons in the jar, and then you let it just sit and the sugar turns into a syrup, and then we put it in the fridge. I have noticed that the longer we let it sit in the fridge with the lemon in it, you get a little bit more of that tart, bitter pith taste to it. It's not unpleasant, it's just there. So I might have to do a bit of a Google. Maybe you're supposed to strain it from the lemons, but there's a lot of juice still in those lemons, so I think you'd want to press it or squeeze it. I don't know. I'll do some research and I'll update you that if I do something with that. But for the moment, we just leave it in the fridge and we just scoop spoonfuls out when we're eating it. Day 7. As I said, we're getting to the end of the month of the 6-week shopping trip, so there is some things that I am just throwing together with what I have. So I have to be a bit more creative sometimes and a bit more purposefully using some of the stuff that we have excess of, but don't necessarily have the other stuff that I would normally have with it. So I had a few sheets of puff pastry still in the freezer. We've still got a fair few eggs at the moment. The chooks are still laying quite well. So I made a sheet pan quiche kind of thing. I also had some salami left from pizza night, so I sliced that up. I covered the pastry with some caramelized onion jam, the salami, a tin of corn. Then I whizzed up 12 eggs with a tin of coconut cream, some salt and pepper and garlic in the Thermomix. Incorporates lots of air into it and spread it out over the puff pastry base, and then baked it in the barbecue. I couldn't tell you how long it took because I wasn't really paying that much attention, and I had to rotate it a few times to make sure that it didn't burn. We wanted the egg in the middle cooked, but not burnt on the bottom or around the edges. It worked really well. I sliced it up into squares. Everyone helped themselves. It went down really well. It's definitely something that I will try making again. When I was looking up ideas of what I wanted to make, there was a lot of things like this that were made with pie crusts, because quiche is normally made with pie crust rather than puff pastry. I think that would make it a bit heavy for the minimal quantity of egg. On the puff pastry it worked really well because the thickness of the topping wasn't very thick. So if I was going to make it in a pie crust, I'd want to make it thicker. So you'd need to use like an actual baking tray rather than a cookie tray sort of thing. But it's definitely something I'll make again. Everyone really enjoyed it and it was nice and simple to do. For dinner that night, I did tuna bake. I made a white sauce in the Thermomix, just a basic, fat, flour and milk based sauce with some garlic, mustard, salt and pepper. And then I mixed through 2 large tins of tuna and most of a bag of the cubed frozen veggies. I cooked a kilo of dried pasta spirals off to al dente. You don't want to take them too far because it's going to go in the oven. In some boiling water, and then split it between 2 of the cast iron baking trays. So I just split the pasta evenly. I then split the white sauce, tuna and veggie mix evenly between the trays as well, adding pasta water as needed to thin it out and mix it up. So my white sauce ended up quite thick because I did it in the Thermomix. I ran out of room. If I do it on a stovetop, it would have ended up thinner because I would have added more liquid, but because I did it in the Thermomix, I didn't have enough room in the bowl. So it's quite thick, poured over the top, and then I add pasta water, which has that nice starchy consistency, which helps to thicken up the sauce as well without adding any more thickening agents, even though the white sauce had the flour in it anyway. So add the pasta sauce, which is nice and hot, helps to thin out and loosen up the pasta into the dish. I then sprinkled it with the seasoned breadcrumbs that I had in the freezer and a spray of oil, and then I baked it. While that was baking, I mixed up sourdough bagel dough for the next day to proof overnight, as I do with most of my sourdough batches. They do an overnight proof. Then I served up the tuna bake. There are some kids who are not overly fond of the tuna bake, so I generally only make it sort of once in the 6-week cycle. Most of them love it, but there is a couple who sort of turn their nose up at it. They eat it, but it's really not their favourite. But the ones who do like it really enjoy it, and Darryl quite likes it as well. And there always ends up being leftovers for the next day too, which is nice. So I do make it at least sort of once in a 6-week period, but I don't make it too much more often than that. They do like tuna patties, like the potato tuna patties and stuff too, so we use tuna for that purpose as well. So, you know, but yeah, I make it because some like it and some don't, and there's not everyone likes every meal, and that's just fine. Day 8, I shaped, boiled and baked the bagels from the dough that I had made the day before. I mixed up a batch of everything but the bagel seasoning to dip them into after they were boiled as well. So the bagel dough that I make enough. It makes 18, 19 bagels. So you break it up into the portions. It's around about 90 grams per bagel. And then you put in a ball. And then once you've balled it all up, then you stick your thumb through the middle and stretch it out to create the hole in the middle for the bagel to be a bagel shape. Then I let them proof for 15 to 30 minutes, depends on temperature, timing, things like that. You just want them to puff up slightly. Once they've puffed up a little bit, I boil them in water that has about a tablespoon of sugar in it, or honey, whatever you want to use, which just helps to help them brown once they're in the oven. So I like to boil them for only about 30 seconds each side. The longer you boil them for, the tougher the crust is going to be. Some people like the crust really tough, some people don't. So I like it to be fairly tender. So I boil it for about 30 seconds and then flip it, and for 30 seconds more, and then place it on a baking tray. I use some semolina on the baking tray to stop it from sticking to the tray. Once they are at a temperature that is handleable, I dip them into the spice mix. So my everything but the bagel seasoning has nigella seeds, sesame seeds, poppy seeds, garlic granules, some onion flakes, and flaked salt, basically. So I dip it in that, and then I place it back on the baking tray until I've got them all done. Once I have them all done, they go into the oven for about 25 minutes. Sometimes I have to rotate trays and stuff so they don't burn on the bottom. There is a video, I'll try and remember to put a card in, of the bagels from start to finish. So if you're interested in seeing more about that, that will show you. But that's the basics of them. I fried up some eggs for the kids and for us, and they also had whatever else they wanted on them. As I said, sometimes these bread products, they just like peanut butter and jam, and if that's what they want, then that is fine. I sprinkled the eggs with the everything bagel seasoning as well because it's just tasty. I really like having a jar of it mixed up because I will sprinkle it on just about anything. It's nice on pasta. It's just nice on just about anything. For dinner that night, it was super simple. We'd received some loaves of bread with the hamper that day, so that some went in the freezer, some got left out. So basically we had breakfast for dinner. It was just a really simple, I was tired, and that's what we did. I toasted up a whole lot of the dark rye bread, scrambled a bunch of eggs, warmed up a couple of jars of the home canned baked beans, put it all on a tray and let them serve themselves. So they had toast with beans and egg. We only have a kilo of bacon left and it was in the freezer, so I didn't cook any bacon up. Because I'd forgotten to pull it out of the freezer. So it was just that. But they were happy to have that. And I think we had cookies or something left that I had made the other day. So I think they had cookies and hot chocolate after that as well. On day 9, we had sushi for lunch. So we have heaps of cucumbers from the hamper to use, and I had a bag of seafood extender in the freezer that I'd pulled out the day before. I made up some Kewpie style mayo, which is basically the same as any other mayo except it uses vinegar and salt, no sweetness to it. It's sort of a savoury mayo rather than a sweet mayo. Mixed it through the seafood mix, sliced up the cucumbers into sticks, and then made sushi rice. I made everyone a roll, and Darryl and I a couple of rolls, and then I let them have at it to use the rest up and make more as they wanted. I always make that first one, but I just let them go with the rest of it and use however they want to use it, because it's good practice for them making them. But also, by the time I've made like 10, I'm over it. So it lets them do that. And they can eat it just in a bowl too. They don't have to wrap it in the seaweed if they don't want to. So I let them serve themselves that. When we got the hamper, I'd put the frozen chickens that we got in the hamper in the fridge to defrost for dinner. So Surreal and I peeled a whole bunch of potatoes. We lined 2 trays with them because we got all those potatoes in the hamper as well. Lined 2 trays with all the little potatoes, and then we put the chickens on top to be roasted. I coated the plain chicken in some lime juice and the sweet and smoky pork rub that I used, and the other chicken had a Portuguese flavouring on it already. So that one was already seasoned. I sprayed a bit of oil over the potatoes and the chicken, and I did end up going back in and putting a bit of lard in the bottom of the trays too, because the potatoes were sticking quite badly in the bottom of those trays. So I just put a little scoop of lard in the bottom of them. Obviously there wasn't enough juices from the chicken to cover the whole bottom of the tray. I roasted them both for about 90 minutes until they were cooked through, and then we served them up for dinner. I kind of was hoping that there'd be leftovers, but with 8 of us and 2 fairly small sized chickens, there really wasn't, which was unfortunate. I got all the bones put into a Ziploc bag so that I could use them for stock, and the juices from the bottom of the pan got put aside to use and to cook rice in or something as well. So we scraped them out into a jar to put in the fridge for use for that. So that was approximately 9 days of meals in the last week of our 6-week shopping trip. So there was some interesting meals in there, some, breakfast for dinner and things like that, as well as some of our standards. But that's how we run the meals. So even at the end of the 6 weeks, we still have plenty of food. I was looking at who's doing Three Rivers Homestead is doing Jessica from Three Rivers is doing a pantry challenge for June, and she does them in February as well. And I always look at them and think it'd be really nice, but pretty much every 6 weeks, by the end of every 6 weeks, we're doing a pantry challenge. The way that we shop means that each month I'm pretty much scouring my pantry shelves and deciding what needs to be used and rotated, and what I have left to be able to use with certain things. So that is, I've looked at doing them and then thought it doesn't really work because I don't shop well enough to have enough, because every sort of 6 weeks I do that. Eventually I will have more of a stock on my shelves, I reckon, just in working things out, especially buying this beef trim that we're buying now from Costco and things like that. I'll end up having a bit more surplus, but most months we have plenty on the shelves. We could get by for another shopping period. The way I look at it is that if I had to get through another 6 weeks for some reason I couldn't go shopping, I'd manage. It wouldn't be pretty, but I'd manage. But it definitely wouldn't be ideal, because we just don't have enough to do that, because I pretty much do a pantry challenge at the end of every 6 weeks. So anyway, that was our meals for 9-ish days, end of a 6-week shopping period, and I hope it gave you some inspiration and you enjoyed watching regardless. And I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.